So we have a caller now from Oregon who hails by the name DJ. DJ, how you doing? How can we help you?
I'm doing fine. How are you gentlemen today?
Very, very well indeed. Are you an
Doing
actual
all right.
DJ or is that just your initials?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Are you an actual DJ? Do you like mix music?
They happen to be my initials.
No.
It's my first name and my middle initial. So it is my, it's not my profession, not even my long shot.
He's still an actual DJ, Lloyd. You know, I mean, he still exists.
I just wanted to clarify.
I can push play on my iPhone iTunes.
That counts.
So yes, I'm a DJ.
That counts. It's all fair. That does it for me. On that basis, I call myself a DJ as well. So, what's your question or observation for us?
Well, I'll try to make it both an observation and a question. I've been listening and watching all of the ACA shows for many, many years. And every time I hear someone like your very first caller, the Precept caller, they're all handled pretty much the same way. I'm not claiming to have a new groundbreaking way of dealing with them. But they always seem to kind of push back on the Precept with more of a philosophical kind of a approach, saying why this doesn't work, why that doesn't work. But what I don't hear mentioned often is I don't think that's their goal. Because many, many years ago, I assume you both are familiar with Saitem Rugenkate.
Mm-hmm.
With who, sorry?
Sorry, what?
Saitem Rugenkate, who is a very popular presuppositionalist.
No, sorry, I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I am.
Okay, well, good. So anyway, he repopularized Precept for a while. But he was caught on camera once telling his followers or whatever that the purpose of the Precept is not to convince anybody or anything like that. It is purely to confuse the issue. It's purely to do what you guys pointed out to Robin, which is you're just trying to get us to say something that's, that sounds ridiculous.
Railroad the conversation.
Here's the thing but here's the thing that I think that the Precepts don't get what they're doing. And I'm not trying to give them pointers. I think they're ridiculous. So I wanted your guys' opinion on this particular issue. Is that when you believe in God and the Bible, you are pretty much saying that you believe in a lot of fanciful stories. Is that generous enough, or is that correct enough?
I mean, the Bible's a big book.
Wouldn't put it that way. They probably wouldn't put it that way, but yeah, that's certainly from our perspective what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, from our perspective. Okay, so but would you agree that they at least have to realize that if they're going to talk about the Bible, they have to be prepared for questions about things like talking snakes and walking on water and that kind of thing, right?
Sure. I think I'd meet you there.
Okay, so if you're if you pride yourself as a great arguer of the Precept position, you're going to get questions about that. And that can sound ridiculous. If you found yourself talking about talking snakes and flying people, whatever, you're going to kind of sound ridiculous. So what you have to do is you have kind of like two choices. You can either take those stories head on, or you can keep the other person from bringing up those stories. I'm sure there's other options too. But it's sort of like, if you think about it, if I call in claiming that I believe in Spider-Man, I can either talk about the climbing on walls and superhuman strength, or I can focus on the fact that he was a photographer and lived in New York. That kind of a thing. I want to keep the supernatural things as far away from the conversation as possible because it sounds stupid. So the Precept, my take on the Precept is they're not actually wanting to talk about philosophy. They want to keep the non-believer from even talking about the topic. They want to remove you from the conversation. They want to remove you from the conversation because as soon as I was clapping in my kitchen making pancakes as I was listening to you say, I wish I could fast forward this guy to get to the question. And we finally said, you guys don't have a rational basis for talking about anything. And that's it's not a philosophical thing. It's not a conversational thing. It's a tactic. They don't want you to talk about anything. So they're telling their followers, don't listen to these people who talk about flying snakes and miracles, because they can't talk about anything. They want to remove you from the conversation. So anytime I hear any of the shows listen or entertain anybody who even remotely sounds like they're going towards precepts, it's like, you don't want to have a conversation. You just want to say that I have no right to voice my opinion.
Yeah, I think your insight there is pretty relevant. I mean, like, so when at least when I host, I'm on these shows, right? I can't assume too much about the attention of people who call in, because I think about when I was a Christian and my sincere beliefs, and I don't want to make too many assumptions about why people believe and what their motives are. But I will say, with presuppositionalists, the intention seems to always be that they're trying to add weight to their allegations, and their allegation being that you aren't rational, or you don't have an ultimate frame of reference. In other words, you can't even come to the conclusions that you do because your philosophical methodology is based on something that's bunk. That's kind of their whole shtick. And you're right. I've never had a conversation too much, maybe like once or twice with a precept on like actual claims of the Bible or, anything else. It does seem to be just this railroading of, well, you can't believe the things that you do because you're just totally off base. Like that seems to be where the conversation goes every time. And that always gets done by, the similar kinds of patterns. It's using jargon that can be confusing or hard to understand on first listening, or making assumptions about things that you believe, which we never actually said, which happened today. It's pretty much happened every single time I've had conversations with precepts. So there are definitely tools and tricks to these methods of conversation that just wouldn't really convince the average person. I don't know why they don't see that, because if a preceptor could honestly give me a tally of how many people they've convinced by their arguments versus how many haven't, what would that tally realistically look like? Because I think it would be pretty high on the side of not convinced, right? But I don't know.
Well, I think we're all aware of the very famous Bible story of doubting Thomas, where when Thomas came back in the apostles and they said, "Hey, we just saw Jesus," and he said, "Oh, really? I don't believe you." They all said, "Well, you see, the theory of non-contradiction can't exist and be exist in the same way."
Yeah.
They tried that on Thomas first, and that didn't work. And that's when Jesus came in, because no one ever uses that to convince anybody. But I'm just going to. Go ahead.
I totally get where you're coming from, and I think again you offer some very cogent insights into the specific problems with these types of callers. I'm just going to kind of say a few things now that might help shed light on the whole situation, because I look at the comments and I see people getting frustrated when we get callers like that. And they're like, why are you wasting time on this type of caller? And, quite often it's because there aren't that many callers. Because the thing you have to remember, without wanting to sound too arrogant to any theists who are watching, let's just say it, we're right. The atheist position of not believing in a deity unless evidence is shown is the correct position. And it's difficult in this day and age where there is a proliferation now, thanks to the internet largely, of logic and reason. We're on the winning side. And so I think it's going to get harder and harder with each passing year, quite frankly, or at least you would hope so, for there to be theists who are bold enough to actually present their arguments on a show like this. So sometimes when we have a frustrating caller, it's because that's the only caller. And we're not going to ignore them and just talk between ourselves when we have a caller who's waiting to engage, because you never know, maybe an interesting conversation can come out of it. But if you are one of those viewers to Talk Heathen or the Atheist Experience and you're frustrated at the nature of the calls, there is something that you can do reach out to local theist groups, local churches, local religious communities, and say, these people want to speak to you and they want to hear your arguments. And if your arguments are good, you're going to be broadcasting those arguments in front of thousands of people, because that's the viewership of these shows. So if you're right, please call into these shows. I hate to kind of sermonize, but I feel as though that's ultimately where the frustration comes from. Why are we allowing these people so much airtime? Quite often it's because there just are so few people willing to defend their position.
Yep, it's true.
Well, I totally don't at all. But I mean, given that I've been listening to these shows for many years, the more you listen, the more that the calls sound the same. And that's I'm not calling it. And by the way, I'm not calling it to say, why do you bother with these callers?
Sure.
I think my final comment, I guess, would be is that I appreciated your way of dealing with it, because as soon as I personally hear people talk about any kind of philosophical reason for believing in God, and it goes toward the, what's your foundation for rational thought, I want the host to do what you did, which is say, can you get to the point? Because if you, I guess my point about the whole supernatural thing is, if you say, you can, look, I'll talk about your precept, I'll talk about your foundation for rational belief all you want, but just answer me one thing. Can you talk to me equally about the fantastical things that happen in the Bible, as opposed to, why I, for some reason, can't even form a rational thought, because everybody gets up every single day not thinking about
presupposing your ultimate position. Presupposing your ultimate position, philosophical position, to be valid. What specific brand of religion would you propose? Great tip there, and I really appreciate you calling in and sharing those insights. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, DJ.
Thanks a lot, guys. You guys are great. I love all the different shows, and you're all wonderful.
And were the pancakes good?
I have not had one yet, but my son apparently thinks they're delicious.
Excellent. So at least the pancakes were good. Okay.
That's good.
Take care, DJ.
Back to the oven. Bye-bye.
See you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
What a nice man.
Yeah, it is nice. It's important to point out, too, with these things that, I don't know a single person on Earth who doesn't have some kind of problem with their epistemology, right? That there's some sort of falter to the way they understand things. That seems to just be the world that we live in. Pointing that out is not novel to me, and it shouldn't be novel to anybody who's having these kinds of discussions. I think DJ makes a great point in that, look, we get it. Yeah, my methodology for figuring out if things are true or not are flawed. So what? So are yours. Prove that you can do it better than me. How the hell do you know that you think you can do it better? I'd love to see it, but they just can't, and they won't. Yeah. And in my opinion, probably never will. So, that's all there is to it.
I've joked on previous shows, maybe this will be the show where we get proof for God. And I think we can say confidently, there never will be a show. It's more about just showing, if anything, that a respectful dialogue is possible, and that maybe a little bit of headway can be made now and then.